Daniel, I've been reflecting on something from today's sermon. The preacher mentioned Ezekiel chapter 22 verse 27 to 29, how leaders can misuse their power. It really hit me. How do you think wrong religious leadership affects communities, both spiritually and practically?
That's a profound question, James. The passage paints a grim picture. It says, "Her princes are like wolves ravening the prey." This analogy is powerful. Wolves devour and scatter sheep, representing leaders who exploit and abandon their people. But it doesn't stop with the princes. The prophets lie, saying, "Thus saith the Lord," when God hasn't spoken. And the people follow their example, oppressing the poor and needy. It's a cycle of decay.
I see that, but how does this impact society beyond the spiritual realm?
Think about it this way. Religious leaders are often moral compasses for their communities. When they go astray, it creates a ripple effect. If they exploit their followers, justify corruption, or turn a blind eye to oppression, it normalizes these behaviors. People begin to lose trust, not just in leadership, but in the moral fabric of the society itself.
Oh. It's serious, Daniel.
Yes. It is serious, James. Imagine a pastor or religious leader amasses wealth by manipulating scripture to demand tithes and offerings, promising miracles and blessings. Meanwhile, their community remains in poverty, struggling to meet basic needs. When people realize they've been exploited, they lose faith, not just in the leader, but sometimes in God himself. I'm not saying tithing and offering in places of worship is bad, rather I'm saying such should be used to better the lives of its congregate.
That makes sense. But doesn't it also impact the economy?
Absolutely. Wrong religious leadership can stifle economic growth in several ways. For one, if leaders promote greed and materialism instead of hard work and stewardship, people might focus on exploiting others for personal gain. This weakens trust and collaboration, which are critical for economic progress.
So, it's like a chain reaction.
Exactly. Corrupt leaders might even mismanage church or community resources, which could have been used for development, building schools, hospitals, or funding businesses. Worse still, if they justify oppression, it can keep marginalized groups in poverty, depriving the economy of their potential contributions.
This is serious.
Then there's the economic impact. A congregation misled into giving beyond their means might neglect investments in education or small businesses. Worse, some leaders promote dependency rather than empowerment. Instead of teaching financial literacy or entrepreneurship, they keep people in a cycle of poverty, dependent on miracle breakthroughs.
So, instead of building, they're draining the community. That's heavy. But what's the alternative? How can religious leaders positively influence the economy and society?
Great question. The Bible offers examples of good leadership. Think about Joseph in Egypt. He used wisdom to manage resources during a famine, saving an entire nation and beyond. Similarly, religious leaders today can inspire economic growth by teaching values like honesty, diligence, and generosity.
Like encouraging people to invest in education and entrepreneurship?
Precisely. They can also create initiatives to support the needy, microloans for small businesses, skill development programs, or even partnerships with governments and NGOs. By living as examples of integrity and stewardship, they can inspire their followers to contribute meaningfully to society.
That's powerful. But how do you think they can address the kind of issues Ezekiel pointed out?
First, by holding themselves accountable. Leaders should surround themselves with people who will speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. They must avoid the vanity and lies Ezekiel condemns. Secondly, they need to actively protect the vulnerable, widows, orphans, and strangers, and create systems that uplift, rather than oppress and marginalize the poor.
That reminds me of Jesus' leadership style. He was always among the poor and marginalized, teaching and healing them.
Exactly. His leadership was rooted in servanthood. If today's leaders emulate that, they can heal not just spiritual wounds, but societal and economic ones too.
That's true. But do you think leaders today can emulate that?
They can, but it takes intentional effort. churches and religious groups must shift from being personality-driven to purpose-driven. This means focusing on collective well-being rather than elevating one person. Leaders should invest in their communities, creating job opportunities, funding schools, or even offering mentorship programs.
So, leadership becomes a partnership with the people? I wish more people thought this way. Imagine the kind of world we'd live in.
Exactly. It's about shepherding, not controlling. A shepherd leads the flock to green pastures and protects them from danger. They don't exploit the sheep for personal gain.
This reminds me of some leaders I admire. They've started agricultural projects, vocational schools, and even health clinics.
And that's the way forward. Religious leaders should be catalysts for holistic growth, spiritual, social, and economic. When done right, they can help eradicate poverty, promote justice, and inspire hope. If we hold our leaders accountable and strive to embody the values we want to see, we can influence change. The wolves in Ezekiel chapter 22 remind us of what happens when we ignore our responsibilities as citizens and followers.
So, Ezekiel's warning is still relevant. It reminds us to be vigilant and to support leaders who embody godly principles. You've given me a lot to think about, Daniel. I'll start by looking at my own actions and praying for our leaders.
That's a good place to start. Change often begins with small, intentional steps.
Moral lessons. 1. Leadership responsibility. Religious leaders must prioritize service, integrity, and accountability to avoid the pitfalls described in Ezekiel chapter 22 verse 27 to 29. 2. Community role. Followers have a duty to pray for, support, and hold leaders accountable. 3. Holistic growth. Effective leadership extends beyond spiritual guidance to include social and economic development. 4. Personal action. Change begins with individuals committing to the values they wish to see in society.